Hi, Danville. Alan Shields here, Chief of Police for the town, and we are 10-8 and in service, which means we are here to make people's lives better, and we do that by safeguarding the lives, rights, and property of everyone we serve. We've actually got a pretty good show today. We're going to talk about crime, or really the lack of crime last week. We had a great week. We're going to cover another section of the FEMA guide, and then again, we're going to talk about crosswalk safety because we continue to have accidents there, and we want to get the information out as best as we can. First off, the guides, we want to talk about those again. Here, let me see if I can clean that up again. So on the FEMA guide, go to our link in the description below. You can download the FEMA All Hazards Guide. We're going to cover our last section tonight. And then you can also go to the Contra Costa County Sheriff's website and sign up for Community Warning System alerts. And you can download the Wildfire Preparedness and Evacuation Guide. This is a live show, so if you have a question, go ahead and throw it in the chat, and I'd be happy to answer it. And if I can't answer it during the show, I'll answer it afterwards in the chat itself. So please feel free to ask any questions that you have. Okay, we're going to start off with crime. We're going to go to our blotter. You can always check it out on communitycrimeapp.com. You can also set up alerts and get those sent straight to your email. The format has changed a little bit, so if you have trouble checking it out, go ahead and reach out to us. But check this out for last week. No Part 1 crimes for the week. That's a bunch of donut holes on the Part 1 crimes. So from September 12th through 18th, we had no Part 1 crimes. Now remember, Part 1 crimes are rape, robbery, homicide, aggravated assault, any theft, so from candy bar to an $80,000 piece of equipment, burglary, so residential or commercial, and vehicle theft. So we had none of those crimes last week. So that is a great week. And all that kudos and all that gratitude goes to all of you. That means that you didn't leave stuff out, that, we know those motivated offenders, they're hard to find, but if you're not leaving stuff out, and if our community looks like it's a community that does not tolerate crime and doesn't want to crime, we're less likely to be victims. So kudos to all of you. You did an excellent job. Frankly, you had a good week with traffic accidents too. We only had 2, 1 injury, 1 property. That's it. September 19th, we had an injury collision on El Capitan at the Iron Horse Trail, and that prompted our crosswalk safety segment later on. And then we had a non-injury collision on Cordell Drive. But I want to talk about it now that we're talking about the actual collision. We will see collisions. If you notice on the show, I don't release the cause of the collision because we don't want to shame people and say someone did something right or wrong. And so by having this crosswalk safety on here, I don't want you to get the impression as though we think the driver's at fault or we think the pedestrian's at fault. It just is a good example and an opportunity to provide some information on how, whether we're a driver or a pedestrian or a cyclist or we're pushing the stroller, how from both sides we can do better in the areas around crosswalks. So before we move on to the crosswalk segment later on, I want to make sure that we cover that. But let's cover thunderstorms. So in our FEMA guide, actually, let me skip that because Kevin's asking a pretty good question here. So Kevin says, I saw Danville and sheriff deputies at each freeway on-ramp in the area Saturday morning. Does that mean that there is a lookout for offenders who just committed a major crime? So Kevin, that is exactly what that is. There can be times where if there's a significant crime or maybe a missing person or maybe a kidnap or, those types of crimes where we've got a vehicle description or some type of car that we can look for, we can put it out and we can have our officers and allied agencies look for that car on the off ramps. And so we do have a roadway observation plan throughout the county that allows us to do that. We work closely with the other agencies in the county. And for those that might be new, the reason I have these 2 patches up here is because Danville contracts services with the sheriff's office. So in Danville, we're all sheriff's deputies. So when you see one, we're the same. But great question. And Kevin, that is exactly what we do. All right, on to the FEMA guide. So this is the last segment. Now we only covered, I think, 5 sections out of there, but there's a lot of other segments in there and it is worth a read. And again, I strongly encourage actually print it out. Don't, some things I know are great digital guides like this, checklists that we use in law enforcement. I always have a printed backup to make sure that should a disaster happen, we're ready to go. So I'd recommend print this out, go over it with your family, and then just stick it in a drawer. And you know that mentally you've already gone over it. And that way, when an incident happens, you'll be prepared and ready to go. But we're going to talk about thunderstorms, lightning, hail. And I know with our lack of rain, we tend to think that that doesn't happen so much anymore here, but we do tend to get a significant amount of thunderstorm and lightning during certain parts of the season. So lightning, I did not know this, but reading the guide, lightning is a leading cause of injury and death from weather-related hazards. And then thinking about it, it actually does make sense because sometimes we tend to do the wrong things, right? We may be on a golf course, it starts to rain, we hear the thunder and lightning, and we stay out. You're on a football field and we stay out. I was, up in North Star. I was with my son and we were riding the downhill mountain bikes up there. And sure enough, the clouds came over and they started seeing lightning and thunder, and it was everybody go in just because it is that hazardous. So what happens if you hear a thunderstorm warning or you hear the sounds, the recommendation is to go inside. If there's a significant event, you will get information from us, and we will do it in two ways. We'll do it through the CWS alerts, and we'll do it through Nixle. And then move from the outdoor areas into a building or a car, and unplug appliances. I'll be honest, I'll tell on myself, I don't personally do that. I know when I lived in an area where we had a lot more thunderstorms, I would do that, but I don't do it here. Here's what I'll say. We do have some flooding in town, and we've had it, if you remember back about 5 years on the west side, when we just had thunderstorm after thunderstorm after thunderstorm. The hill was so saturated and that the water was not sheeting off properly. It wasn't going into the storm drain. And so it was going out and onto the roadway. So there are hazards associated with these, and we would just ask for you to look out. And if you get a significant amount of water in the road, and believe it or not, even in Danville, I've seen water knee to waist deep in some of our roads when we've had these significant weather events. So if you see a roadway that's obstructed and it's got water on it, don't attempt to cross. The best thing you can do is stay in a safe place inside. All right, so that is our section on the FEMA guide. And when I talk about the two ways you're going to get noticed, in the description below, there's directions on how to download or how to sign up for your community warning system alerts. You can also download that wildfire preparedness guide, but you have to opt in. If you don't opt in, you'll never get a notice on your phone. And for Nixle, all you have to do is send a text message to 888-777. So instead of putting mom or dad in the 2, it's 888-777. And then in the subject line where you'd put like, what are we having for dinner? You just put the zip code 94526, 94527, 06, 8283, whatever it is. And that way you can get those alerts. All right, I'm going to check the chat. It doesn't look like there's any updates. I do want to talk about crosswalk safety. It is very important, and I'm seeing a little bit of a trend, and not that it's happening every day, but to me, when we get a couple of accidents at a trail, that's too many, because those are typically involving a car versus a person or a cyclist, and those are always going to be scary accidents, and we just don't want to see them. And I think part of the problem is we actually have a very polite and courteous driving community for the most part. I'm the police, so I realize there's violators out there. But people do try to make an effort at these Iron Horse Trail crossings and a lot of these crosswalks to actually slow down and really look. And I think because of that, and I know that I walk and ride on these trails all the time, that it makes runners like myself and cyclists feel safe as though they can just go. But the reality is you can't. When you come to one of these, our traffic engineer, Andy Dillard, has really done a great job at enhancing the safety. I mean, this is a well-lit intersection. I'm showing it during the day, but at night, the second stop sign that he installed actually blinks red. There are lights that light up the crosswalk. There is a lot of stuff, but frankly, our accidents typically don't happen at night. They happen during the day, and it's when people go right through the intersection. So I do want to show you a couple of videos. I've shown them before, but the first one here, if you look on the left-hand side, there was a runner that went out into the intersection, and I'll play that portion back real quick. Cue that. There we go. Okay. So if you see the runner is coming out at that moment, So he comes out into the middle of the intersection without actually stopping. So I'll play it back a little bit so you can see where I'm talking about now. So watch the runner come out, never makes an attempt to stop. The pedestrian has the obligation in that scenario. The pedestrian has the obligation not to just run out into the crosswalk. Because there's a crosswalk there, that doesn't mean a pedestrian or cyclist can put blinders on and just go out into the intersection. It means that they must stop, ensure that it's safe to do so, and then enter the crosswalk. Then once they're in the crosswalk, the drivers now have a responsibility to yield to a pedestrian that's in the crosswalk. And it's not supposed to be a race. And Robin, you've got a good point. So Robin says cyclists need to obey the same laws. Seen so many just fly by with no stopping. Robin, you're 100% right. And I ride a bike and I stop and I make sure that I do those. But let me show you another one real quick. So this is one I've played before, but this is a picture. I'm going to pause it here after. But that was a collision that occurred where the cyclist ran the sign and went right out into the intersection without ever stopping. And this is from the inside. So there's one view on the right-hand side of your screen where you can see that's the driver. The driver is absolutely not looking at his phone. He's hands on wheels, focusing. And if I didn't blur out his face, you would see that he is looking straight ahead. So he is doing what we want all of our drivers to do, which is to really pay attention. The cyclist comes out of a shadow area and ends up going right into the car. The driver never had an opportunity. So in that case, the cyclist never gave the driver an opportunity to see him. And what the cyclist should do and is required to do is stop, ensure that it's safe, and wait to proceed. So what I did is at that same Iron Horse Trail that I showed the picture at on Paraiso, I actually show an example of how to handle that. And so if you watch this video, so the cyclist comes up, approaches, and this you can see is you got the stop signs there, approaches, looks to one side, comes to a stop. That is a stop, believe it or not. Looks to the side, actually makes eye contact with that driver. The driver waved him along, and then the cyclist continued on. And so the cyclist in that scenario, in that video that you just saw, the cyclist actually goes up, waits, looks, and then proceeds. That is how you do it safely. And I know we have debates sometime about who's right and who's wrong and who was in the crosswalk first. Was it the pedestrian and the driver should have yielded? The bottom line is if you want to preserve your own life, the best thing you can do is take additional care. Make sure that you're really paying attention because those can be some pretty hazardous intersections. And I tend to say it's a trend, but we know in Danville we don't have a trend. A trend would be, every week we've got an accident. We don't have that. We've got a very, very low accident rate. So for us, if we see a couple of them in 1 year, that gets to be pretty frustrating. And oftentimes these collisions involve our kids. And so we really want to pay attention to that and make sure that we get them doing the right thing and not running those stop signs. All right, that is all I have. And Lou has a very good comment here. It says, runners assume that the car should stop for them. And Lou, I think that was exactly the example in that one video with the runner that was crossing the road. Because our drivers are so considerate, we as runners and cyclists, we get programmed to think, I can go because it's safe, because everybody slows down at the Iron Horse Trail. I was asking people, I asked my wife and I asked several other of our friends, what behavior, if you're driving, what do you do as you come to an Iron Horse Trail crossing? And every one of them, every single driver said, oh, I slow way down and I look and I try to find it. And so I think that courteous behavior programs everyone that's using the trail to say, oh, people will stop, they'll slow down in anticipation of a runner or cyclist. So Lou, I think you hit the nail right on the head. I mean, that I think is what is part of that programming and causing us to do that. Sue has some good advice. And Sue, I'll tell you this, I like to drive boats, go skiing and that sort of thing. And one of our Marine Patrol partners gave me the best advice ever. He's like, if you want to do things very professional and right and safe, the phrase he would always use is slow is pro, right? If you're taking it slow, You're going to be able to pull up to the dock easy. You're going to be able to navigate these crosswalks. All of that is going to be figured out. So Sue, I think you gave us some of the best advice, so I appreciate it. And I'll see you in about a half an hour at our Citizens Academy. We're about about a third of the way through our Citizens Academy. We've got some of our weekend events coming up, and we're going to have a good time. So if you're interested in our Citizens Academy, it's a 7-week program. We do it here at the police department. We do 2 Saturdays where we go out to the driving course and we do some force options type of scenarios, and it's a good time. So if you're interested, you can email us directly. You can also go to our website and fill out the application, send it in, and we'll get you on the list for our spring academy that starts next April. All right. With that, we want to still continue to plug our community warning system. So go check that out in the link in the description below. Make sure you download that wildfire preparedness guide. Sign up for those alerts, because if we do have that weather incident that we talked about earlier, that is going to be one of the systems we use to let you know. And then also download that FEMA all hazards checklist. And that if you download those 2 guides, all these crazy things that happen, you will be way better prepared, because I'm sure after reading those, you're going to have extra water, you're going to have extra food, you're going to have maybe even a generator to keep your fridge on so that your medication stays good. You will be prepared, right? And I'm sure, because I literally have 24 fans that watch this, that's not 45,000 people, your neighbors will appreciate it, because you will be prepared and they may be a little less prepared, and you can share that with them. So Martha has a comment I wanted to kind of show real quick. So it says, sometimes it's really hard, really tough to see runners and riders in shadows and glare, even if one slows down. So I'll say this, Martha, every day, my wife and I are coming back from the gym. We're going down Camino Ramon, and there is a lady that runs, and she has one of those vests on that like blinks and flashes. I could be like way down by the Rose Garden Shopping Center, and I'm seeing her way down the street, like as far as I can actually see until the road curves. You have no problem spotting her. So that's a good point. A lot of times we wear little blinkies, or we have reflective clothing on, or something that allows you to see. So we've actually got Renee Morgan checking in too. It says, thank you, DPD, for being so vigilant and providing great advice. And I'm assuming she's talking about the Citizens Academy. It says is a wonderful program, and she was a graduate. And I do have photos, I think, from when she graduated and was a volunteer here. So Renee, thanks. I appreciate you checking in, and it's always nice having your boss's boss checking in on you, and I appreciate that. All right, so we are out, which means we're 10:10. That means we're off duty, but we're always 10:8 and in service to all of you, and I want you to have a good night. Bye-bye.